Recorded Books presents A Knot in the Grain and Other Stories by Robin McKinley, narrated by Liz Pearce with Laura Knight Keating. The Healer. The child was born just as the first faint rays of dawn made their way through the cracks between the shutters. The lantern wick burned low. The new father bowed his head over his wife's hand as the midwife smiled at the might of humanity in her arms. Black curls framed the tiny face. The child gave a gasp of shock, then filled its lungs for its first cry in this world. But when the little mouth opened, no sound came out. The midwife tightened her hands on the warm, wet skin as the baby gave a sudden writhe and closed its mouth, as if it knew that it had failed at something expected of it. Then the eyes stared up into the midwife's own, black and clearer than a newborn should be, and deep in them such a look of sorrow that tears rose in the midwife's own eyes. "The child does not cry," the mother whispered in terror, and the father's head snapped up to look at the midwife and the baby cradled in her arms. The midwife could not fear the sadness in this baby's eyes, and she said shakily, "No, the baby does not cry, but she is a fine girl nonetheless." And the baby blinked, and the look was gone. The midwife washed her quickly and gave her into her mother's eager, anxious arms, and saw the damp-curled, black-haired head of the young wife bend over the tiny curly head of the daughter. Her smile reminded the midwife of the smiles of many other new mothers, and the midwife smiled herself, and opened a shutter long enough to take a few deep breaths of the new morning air. She closed it again firmly, and chased the father out of the room so that mother and child might be bathed properly and the bedclothes changed. They named her Lily. She almost never cried. It was as though she did not want to call attention to what she lacked. And so, at most, her little face would screw itself into a tiny red knot, and a few tears would creep down her cheeks. But she did not open her mouth. She was her parents' first child, and her mother hovered over her, and she suffered no neglect for her inability to draw attention to herself. When Lily was 3 years old, her mother bore a second child, another daughter. When she was 6½ a son was born. Both these children came into the world howling mightily. Lily seemed to find their wordless crying more fascinating than the grown-up speech. And when she could, she loved to sit beside the new baby and play with it gently and make it chuckle at her. By the time her little brother was taking his first wobbly steps, it had become apparent that Lily had been granted the healer's gift. A young cow or skittish mare would fall more quietly with her head in Lily's lap. Children with fever did not toss and turn in their beds if Lily sat beside them. And it was usually in Lily's presence that the fevers broke and the way back to health began. When she was 12, she was apprenticed to the midwife who had birthed her. Jolene, by then, was a strong, handsome woman of 45 or so. Her husband had died when they had had only 2 years together and no children. And she had decided that she preferred to live alone as a healer after that. But it was as the midwife she was best known, for her village was a healthy one. Hardly anyone ever fell from a horse and broke a leg, or caught a fever that her odd-smelling draughts could not bring down. "I'll tell you, young one,"
Sample complete. Ready to continue?